Listen, I understand if people do need to go, given that we advertised that we would end at 1:30, but if you are able to hang around and be part of a little bit more discussion, I'd welcome that. Is there one or two particular questions that people want to direct to Will?
Yeah, just one.
Yeah, Greg?
Excuse me. Hi, Will. Will, Greg Milan. We have met a while ago. I thought it was a great presentation, but I just wanted to thank you for how you talk with young people about drugs. I think that is a really sensible way to do it, to talk about your own observations of what you see as a person and have that conversation and not mention statistics and studies and waste of time, all that. I just think that's so refreshing and such a, great way to go. So good on you. It's good.
Yeah, we're fortunate at Top Blokes because we have been given the freedom to have a harm minimisation approach. And I think with the information at the hands of young people these days, it's very, very hard. And just the vast amount of information online, you can confirm any point that you wish. So sometimes the more personal approach is the one that probably has the better outcomes. Because I've had not heavy debates, but I've had quite high level debates with young people that have information that seems to supersede the information that I've had when I thought I've done my research hard. And it's crazy to just think about, why have this debate with this young person when sometimes all I have to say is something as simple as, I'll give you the marijuana chat that I give the young boys and I'll stop speaking. I have about 10 friends that started smoking marijuana quite heavily. If you were to draw what I call the drop kick chart, so the people that are struggling the most in life, the guys that smoke the earliest are highest on the drop kick chart. That's all I say to them. I say, if you want to be a drop kick, start smoking marijuana at a very young age. And I said, maybe that's not statistically or it might not be medically relevant, but I've seen it in a few cohorts of friends my age, and it seems to be the reality.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks.
What about Neil Hall? He seems to be a bit of an exception, doesn't he?
I beg your pardon?
Sorry about that.
I can neither confirm nor deny that. There is a question. There is a question for, maybe I should have had my Malibu behind me instead of the Men's Health Week banners. There's a question from Gabe in the chat box. In a group setting, Will, what are tips for kind of winning over the disruptive individual?
Yeah, I think unfortunately the two ways to approach it is if you do get the time to be one-on-one with the disruptive individual, if you can just make him recognise the influence he has on his peers and try to put the power in his hands to say, you're an outstanding young man. You don't even probably recognise the fact that I think your humour's good. They're often more class clown than they are negative influences. You're hilarious. I'll get on the same wavelength as you. We can bounce off each other, but you're going to influence more boys positively in this setting than if I kick you out and you just go end up disrupting English or maths, because we get the work in classes. The other thing that sometimes does work is you just make the masses kind of upturn. If you can get to talk to the rest of them without him, maybe you send him out for 5 minutes and you say, look, boys, yous are all mates with little John, whatever his name is. And I think he's got a lot of potential, but he probably doesn't see it. And it's because as much as you laugh at his jokes because he is funny, or as much as you let him get away with saying these ridiculous things, unfortunately, it just makes it harder for all of us. And I'd rather use pull him into line. And they often do.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I tried something similar to that once because I work in a homelessness refuge down in Queenview. And if you just approach it from that situation, try and be as positive as possible and be like, hey, look, mate, I can see that you're a bit of a good role model, or not role model, but I can see you're a bit of an influential leader in the group. How can we best use this in the way that can also just not only benefit sort of the class that you're in at the moment, but how can we benefit just to inspire the kids, And so.
Yeah. A lot of young boys also don't understand, and this might even go back into the ADHD chat, and that is having the courage to even just get up in class and do something a bit silly if you think it's funny might actually end up positive for them in the long run. Like, it's quite heavily managed and often reprimanded in schools, but in sports it's not.
Yeah, bloody oath.
Yeah.
Bloody oath. No, that's the thing. Like, I feel like one of the biggest parts of my success, I think, working in this field is I just don't. And Neil, you'd be well aware of this too. Is that I just I take myself seriously, but I just try and not take myself as seriously and just be just an absolute clut. So, and I feel like that works wonders. So, and it really, and the kids see it and they're like, oh, look at this guy, he's bloody unco. So, and then just get along with it. So. But yeah, I like what you're saying in the chart. It's very good, and I'm sure you're very busy. But I'd love to have another yarn with you sometime to try and to learn more off you.
Yeah, for sure, Gabe. I'd love to know more about you. I missed the start of the presentation, so if you already presented, I apologise.
Oh no, I didn't present, mate.
Thanks, Gabe. We got another question in the chat. What's the response from teachers in schools after implementing these sessions? And I think that could also be directed to DJ and Cass as well.
Do you want me to tackle another one, or would we like someone else to?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be good to hear from both of you around that one. Response from teachers in schools.
I would just say that we've had nothing but positive and heaps of support from most of the schools we're in, and that actually plays a huge part in how successful the workshops are, is how much of a buy-in the teacher gives. It particularly helps if we do have a young type male teacher, or just a male teacher, or teacher in general, that kind of is aware of the messaging that we're having, and then kind of pushing it within the school environment when we're not there. But I don't think we've ever really had any pushback from teachers, and we don't have teachers present in a lot of our workshops, but when they do partake in our workshops, I think that they all jump on board. More than anything, I think that they're like, I don't know, they like the freedom that we're approaching the sessions with, because I think that as teachers, you probably do have to keep another level of a barrier up. Like, one of the last points that we didn't get to on my spin wheel was lifting the curtain and allowing yourself to talk about personal stories. And you obviously need to keep that certain level of professionalism as a teacher, that they can't know your own personal stories, because it is a school and you're there every day and you're at a different level. So we're trying to be that middleman between maybe a coach or an older cool cousin or something and a teacher. We're not trying to be a teacher, luckily.
DJ, what about you? How would you answer that?
So it's a really important question, because when we're working with schools and young people, and our young males, especially across our programs, the teachers are an incredibly important medium for us to get to them and to facilitate all of our programs. And we've been really lucky that they've always been on our side, and they've really seen the value of the mentoring programs, the presentations and the forums, so much so that, you know, across our 3 forums, we usually get almost a lot of the same schools coming back and eager to wanting to come back, because they just see a lot of the impact. I think Anthony made a comment on the chat earlier that, you know, what this is trying to do is trying to, you know, break that idea that young men don't talk. And I think teachers are wanting to kind of get on board with that too. And I think it's equally important for the boys, or for the young people, to see as well. You know, we saw in our the statistics that, you know, young males don't see teachers as maybe good adults to, you know, to talk to or seek advice on relationships, or seek help for their feelings of stress or their well-being. And I think teachers being supportive in these sort of programs that, you know, Will's talking about, and Conviction Group, I think it just enables the young people to also see that, you know, the teacher is on their side and is someone that is there to support them as well. And I think it's a really important shift that we can implement. So it has been really nice to see the teachers respond very positively. Neil, as you know, when we were finished our survey, we got several different teachers across various positions, so head teachers, principals, teachers in different faculties, to actually give us some feedback on our survey to see was it really okay and tapping into the right things. So it's been really collaborative with Conviction Group and the teachers, because they are a very, very important party in all this.
Yeah, good. I'd like to sort of shift a question in a little bit slightly different direction, away from schools and more into sort of boys that are more on the margins. I know we've got some people here that work in homelessness and have worked in juvenile justice, but what are there any kind of, I want to throw it over to anyone now. What are some of the kinds of ideas or tips or themes that you found come out of the day today that might actually help us working with boys in the margins?
Neil, I used to run it's Karen Nicole
Hi,
here
Karen.
from Australia. Prior to the role I'm in, I used to coordinate an at-risk youth program, many of which were young males, and it replicated, it was a flow approved program, flexible learning option approved program. But one of the frustrations and barriers that we came up against was because of the high level of supervision and having to have, one volunteer to one or two of the youth. It was a great program, but it was limited on capacity because it replicated a men's shed. So you're doing things like metalwork, mechanics, all those sorts of things. And a lot of the men's sheds from around the region actually came to us and said, we'd love to be able to offer what you're doing in a similar capacity, but some of the barriers and challenges for them to be able to do that, and some of them have done it, but they've found it very challenging, is to actually go through the process of getting approved to be able to do it. And one of the components of our flow program that was declined to ever be approved, which was really successful with disengaged youth, was equine assisted learning therapy with horses. So I'm just wondering if there's any comments around how some of those barriers and challenges from being able to, offer that choice, to those youth who are at risk and disengaged, to actually work towards re-engaging. We had some fantastic outcomes with that program, but it could be broadened, but unfortunately there's a lot of barriers and challenges for organisations to be able to offer that.
Yeah, great question, Karen, and really good to hear the work that you've been doing. I know that some of my colleagues have done some similar kind of work with sheepdogs in the rural areas of New South Wales, and particularly with Aboriginal young males. And that was a fantastic program, getting them to train sheepdogs. And it's like Will was saying, like you find anything that works, really, anything that any of your young males and your boys can connect with. And Toby said the same thing, like, what is it that they're passionate about? Let's develop a program that they'll get on board with. A lot of my stuff has been in sport and music in the past, but street art as well. But you find things that they'll engage in, and try and work with it that way. I understand what you're saying, Karen. There's lots of barriers there, but
I was going to say, Neil, we worked with some of the local men's sheds in terms of running a mentoring program, and we're a small group in terms of WAM as a community-based association with not a lot of funding, but we tried to link with bigger organisations like Anglicare and other youth organisations. And what we found is that TAFE were running a mentoring program. I don't know if anyone has heard of Planet Youth. It was around probably about 12 years ago, and it was basically a mentoring program where they were bringing mentors into high schools and linking kids up in year 10 to talk about vocational options. And so they would train mentors to come into school, link with a kid in year 10 and talk about their job and all that sort of stuff. So we jumped on the back of that and trained mentors. But then because we were going to use power tools and all sorts of things, then all the mentors had to do power tool training, like safety training. But once you sort of ticked all those boxes, it was a great avenue to link the boys to the men's sheds through their welfare officer at the high school. So, you know, you sort of have to, I guess, on the local level, we just found looking for opportunities of training and credentialing, screening, obviously police checks and all that. So I guess it's one of those things I think that you've got to chip away at and tick quite a few boxes, but it's quite possible to do that. And once you've done those sort of credentialing, it opens up brilliant opportunities. And we had great outcomes doing lots of building. We had about 12 mentors trained, so older men to work with younger guys. And mainly we did building stuff with power tools, building sheds, garden work. And the boys who were referred through the welfare officer at the high schools just loved linking up with a local bloke. We had plenty of food, so we'd cook lunch together over a fire and eat it. But we found, I guess I'm saying the one way is you just got to look at your local resources of what's available and sort of tick all the kind of safety credentialing boxes, which is quite possible. But I think once you've done that, we ran that program for about 10 years. So sort of the work paid off.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Amanda.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I was just going to say I've had many hats in the youth sector. One was working at a youth centre around your neck of the woods in the beautiful Blue Mountains. We had a program when we had a youth worker who was particularly mechanically minded. They got an old car and just started working on it with the boys. Another area you can tap into for volunteers and sometimes funding is your local Rotary clubs. A lot of them, youth is one of our big avenues of service that we work on. We do youth camps, leadership camps. There's other programs you can get your young people into. You can also get volunteers. Most Rotarians will have their working with children's check already done. Some have national police checks and things like that, but there's quite, a lot of them are older and retired. A lot of them are happy to mentor young people. There's junior versions of Rotary that you can start in school, and then 18 to 30s as well. Happy to talk to anybody about that stuff if you want more information or if you want contacts in your local area. But there are community organizations around that help. I mean, the biggest thing, like Karen was saying, the alternative therapies and the things that are slightly left of center are the ones that really work, 100%. But then services getting the funding and then the people to run them is the second half of that conversation. And that's often where we get stuck and where the young people who are really in need get lost. So it's a matter of, like Peter was saying, leveraging your resources and thinking outside the box, for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. That's great thoughts. And speaking of the Blue Mountains, if any of you are travelling up the mountains at any time soon, put some money back into the local fire-torn economies, I encourage you to dip into Katoomba and see the street art walk gallery in Beverly, just off Katoomba Street. It's one of the projects that I was involved in a few years ago, which engaged a lot of marginalised young guys in a community project. It's an awesome sight to see. The whole street is essentially a gallery full of different forms of street art. There is a comment in the chat box from Kylie asking, noting that we need to remember that boys are part of whole communities, and whether anybody wants to, any of our speakers or anyone else who wants to chime in, has any comment on how we work with the communities around boys as well.
Yeah, Neil, I was actually just addressing that in the messages.
Oh, Amy, thanks.
on behalf of Top Blokes. So in terms of what Top Blokes do in this space, Kylie, I'm the head of programs and operations, and that's something that's always come into my mind. We've got amazing work happening with our youth workers on the ground with our young men, but what about these support services in that period after we've finished our mentoring program? So we're typically with the boys for 3 to 6 months, but what happens next, and where are these supportive networks around them? So in terms of parents, we've come up with a few strategies. We've actually created an ebook that can be downloaded off our website at the moment, 5 ways to have difficult conversations with teenage boys. And it's just a really simple ebook that we allow the parents to download that is written from the experience of our youth workers and how our youth workers have these conversations. Additionally to that, in our program, we have something called a supporters program that offsets the work that we do, where the boys can choose an adult in their life that they feel comfortable having conversations with. And at the end of every Top Blokes session, we actually send that adult a text message to say, hey, today in Top Blokes, we spoke of anger management. Have a chat with so-and-so about what he learned in the Top Blokes session, and tell him a story about how you dealt with anger and what strategies you have in place to deal with anger. And what we've found through the research in setting up that program is that boys want to have a conversation based around experiences that the older people have had. They don't want a lecture telling them how to do things. They actually want experience-based learning. So learning from what other people have done and heard the side of the story of their parents or their trusted elder in what experiences they've had as a teenager. In terms of the work we do in schools, we tend to work with our wellbeing officers within the schools to create a boys wellbeing strategy as part of their implementation of Top Blokes. So we may start a relationship with the school where it's short term and we just sign on to deliver a program for a trial. But after we're there for a long period of time, we encourage a conversation with the wellbeing officer and the principal to engage a boys wellbeing strategy that's focused purely on the boys that they work with within the school.
Thanks so much, Amy.
You're welcome.
I'm going to go to Bob, who's had his hand up for a while.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be in this conversation, and just hopefully I can be brief about what I felt was a very innovative program in Costa Rica, which was restorative justice. Now, these were high-risk kids that, like many adolescent men, do stupid things. They steal, they strong-arm a drug dealer, and these kinds of things. But the model they used was non-punitive. They didn't have to go to court. There wasn't a sentence. There wasn't a parole officer. There wasn't a post-exit kind of containment and control. What they had was a kind of, we'll call it a juvenile detention center, but it was not really a detention center. There was gardens there. If the young man had children, they went there. The whole family was involved. And all the people, all the young men who lived there were part of the healing, because the goal for the person who did this stupid act was healing, forgiveness, returning to the victim that they victimized by stealing or whatever they did, asking for forgiveness, working with that, and then returning to their families to heal whatever social and familial problem there was. Now, that coupled with I hate these words, inmates, but the other guys who lived in this detention center became the container, the peaceful container for violence or acting out. And that's what happened is the guards took a secondary position backwards, while the young men began to create their own culture of healing and mentoring their friends that were now in prison. I hate these words because these are old words that don't apply here, prison, incarceration. But what happened was that these kids would leave based on maturity, not based on the length of sentence. And they could return to their culture unscathed and without a record. I'll stop there and just say, whoever talked about mentoring has been hugely successful in the US, huge, with high targeted groups and getting all kinds of groups in there, especially grandparents or retired people, because we have over 75 million retired people in our country. It's a huge body of knowledge and experience that want to help. They don't want to hang out on the golf course, you know, and their wives are quite happy to say, get out of the house. Now, just a couple of models that we've seen work. I'll stop there.
Yeah, thanks, Bob.
And congratulate you guys for all the work you do, because it's top drawer, top drawer.
Yeah, thanks.
Could I say something, please?
Yeah, William, yeah, sure.
So I'm with an organization called Penrith Men's Walk and Talk. Started about a year ago with about 6 guys. It's now over a year later, we have 200 guys walking around in a Nepean River every week. Over the course of this year, we've seen an increase of young men coming along. And every 3 to 4 weeks, we have a guest speaker comes along. And then afterwards, one of the group gets up and speaks. A lot of these speakers now are these young men who want to talk about their journey, and that's encouraging other young men then to come along and to also talk about their journey. So it's a great initiative. It's free, doesn't cost a cent, and we're very well supported by the local community here in Penrith, and the local business community give us free coffees every week before we walk. So there's an initiative working brilliantly well. The young guys come along, they interact with the older guys, and yep, they're getting a lot out of it. A lot of guys have told us if it hadn't been for the walk, they wouldn't be here now. So we must be doing something good.
Yeah, thanks, William. It's a great initiative. And people, if you want to see a short video about that group, go to the Men's Health Week website or the Mengage website. I'm sure Shravan can pop the details in. We've got a short video on the Penrith Men's Walk and Talk group up there. I'm conscious that it's now heading towards 2 o'clock, and I want to thank you all for your willingness and enthusiasm for sticking around. Can I just ask you all to just give a note of thanks to all our speakers for today: Toby, Martin, Diane, Cassidy, and Will. Thank you guys for, guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Human beings is what we are. Thank you all for your fantastic input, and everyone else for your great input and your great questions as well.